up, guys? Welcome to NFL Spotlight. It's your producer and co-host Ben Allen here on this Thursday, September 25 edition of the show. Ari's out today, but we have a great show ahead today with my friend Sam Monson from Check the Mic helping me out. We're going to get started here in just a second, but before, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're listening, watching, all that kind of stuff. Hit the bell, turn on the notifications, all that jazz. Our episode that came out this week for our Spotlight guest was Baron Browning of the Arizona Cardinals. That's out now. He's been an important part of that defense that's looking stout. It's a young defense minus Calais Campbell, but they're starting off pretty hot right now. He talks a little bit about coming over from the Broncos last season, deadlifting 630 pounds at 15 years old. That Calais Campbell impact, maybe a little bit of some Cookie Monster references. And yeah, it's just a fun interview. You guys should go listen to that right now. But right now, though, we got to talk about the Minnesota Vikings. And I have brought on one of my friends here from on the 33rd Team Network, Check the Mic's very own Sam Monson. Sam, how are we doing today?
Doing well. How about you, Benjamin?
I'm doing well, Samuel. I'm doing well. We're going through all the different teams right now, trying to focus on somebody new every Thursday. Last week we had Cam Wolf here to talk about Miami Dolphins. Not as bad of a situation in Minnesota as what's going on in Miami, but it's actually pretty positive, I think people would say, with the Minnesota Vikings right now. 2-1. You know, your quarterback situation's a little murky, but I think people at this stage of the game are probably taking a winning record and saying that's okay. Those wins so far against the Bears and Bengals, the Joe Burrow-less Bengals to be clear, and they had a gross 6 total points against the Atlanta Falcons. Second year in a row that we've seen quarterback changes, or quarterback change in plans early in the season. JJ McCarthy missed that whole rookie season. Now he's already out with an ankle injury. He's already confirmed to be out this upcoming week. It's been different personnel-wise those first couple weeks. Aaron Jones out. Now you've got Jordan Mason taking over, that kind of stuff. But let's really focus on the meat and potatoes here, which is the quarterback position. JJ McCarthy has struggled 7 of the 8 quarters he played. The one quarter that he played really well, he ends up winning NFC Offensive Player of the Week, which, okay. No more discussion needed, particularly on that one. Meanwhile, Carson Wentz comes in. They go against the Joe Burrow-less Bengals. They win 48-10, albeit a lot of that scoring came from the defense, so we're not going to give him all of the absolute kudos. But we're at a point where we look at this team that very much is in a win-now mode. They've got all these pieces around the team that you want to be able to get the best out of while they're in their prime. So the question kind of reels back to where we were last year when we had Sam Darnold on the squad. What is actually the best plan for this current iteration of the Minnesota Vikings? Is it to stay with JJ McCarthy when he's healthy? Or do you just give the reins over to Carson Wentz and say, run wild until the wheels fall off?
I mean, I think all options are on the table for the Vikings at this point. One of the things coming into the season is that we didn't really know about the Vikings. We knew their defense is good. We knew the situation broadly is pretty good for a young quarterback to step into. But not knowing about J.J. McCarthy yet means you don't really know about the Vikings yet. And now we're 3 weeks into the season, and we still don't know about J.J. McCarthy. And we also don't really know about Carson Wentz either, if you want to give him the gig, because it's one game against terrible defense and a backup quarterback, and the defense made most of the plays and swung that entire game out of the way before Wentz really had to do anything, right? So we're in this weird world where I think 3 games in, they're 2-1, but we still don't really know much about this Minnesota Vikings team. And so I think all options are on the table. If Carson Wentz goes out there and plays really well in this European stretch, the Dublin and London game, if he looks great and is basically flawless for 2 weeks and they win those games and, all is well, I think it's going to be pretty hard to give the job back to McCarthy based off what he showed right away. The other thing that is unknown from the outside is we don't really know what their feeling is on McCarthy, right? Because from the outside, we've seen incredibly little of him. We saw basically 2 preseasons. We've seen a whole training camp in preseason, and then he got hurt and went down, and that was rookie year gone. And then they didn't get him back until January of this year. So they basically got him for another offseason program. So training camp, preseason again, and then this 7 quarters of football, or 8 quarters of football, most of which have been bad. So I think a lot still depends on what they thought of him when they got him, right? And what they think in practice and all those kinds of things, that obviously they're going to say he looks great and we've got total confidence in him. And, he's been the plan all the way along because that's what you say to a starting quarterback. But that could be anywhere from that's 100% true to that's just total media spin that we put out there because that's what you say. If they really don't know that much about McCarthy, you remember a guy with a really sort of scant college resume, they just didn't need him that much, right? And then very little in terms of actual anything to go on at the NFL level. If they're kind of in the dark the same way everybody else is, then they might be inclined to give it to Carson Wentz, like give it to the guy that's showing he can operate the offense and play at a high level. Or if the stuff they're saying out loud to the media is actually how they feel, then they're going to be more inclined to give it back to McCarthy once he's healthy.
Do you think that that also sheds a little bit of light on maybe that he's not ready? Is that Carson Wentz went in there after only being there a couple of weeks? It's not like he was there throughout the preseason and basically operated the offense, I would assume, pretty close to what McConnell wants or O'Connell wants.
Yeah, I mean, there's the funny thing about football is you never get the A/B analysis, right? There's always confounding variables, and one of the biggest ones from McCarthy to Carson Wentz is a Christian Darrisaw came back into the lineup, their left tackle. So you go from having turnstiles at left tackle, whichever backup guy was in there, to a top 5 left tackle when the quarterback change is made, and that's just unlucky for McCarthy, right? There's nothing you can do about that. That's just the way it went. But it means it's really difficult to look at those two games and say, McCarthy's struggling really badly and this is rough. And then, oh, look, Wentz looks great. Yeah, but like the difference between those two guys, like the left tackle on its own is massive. And that's independent of, plus Rodgers makes a couple plays on the back end for the defense and suddenly the game's out of control. And, Wentz has a very beneficial sort of game flow situation to work with in a way that McCarthy didn't really have. Like it's difficult to compare them directly. And that's why I think, you need the more sample size, more evidence. You need to see Wentz now this week in Dublin. You need to see him again the next week in London and see how it works. And if you get multiple weeks where it looks, night and day different, then even if it's down to the return of Darrisaw and the return of Jordan Addison and all those other things, again, it's difficult to take him out of the lineup and run the risk that it isn't.
Yeah. No plans for you to head over to Dublin? Are you heading over?
I wanted to go and we couldn't swing. We needed Aer Lingus to step up and sponsor us, and bring us all over. The homecoming return. We could have been doing all these, touristy things with Steve. It would have been great, but they didn't. They weren't interested.
It would be interesting. Maybe they'd let you. Could blow a horn. You could do a lot of different things. They could bring you over, and you could be like the official, like mascot of the team when they're international. Particularly if you're going to be there, right?
I know, yeah. I could have done all kinds of things, but alas, no. We're going to be here in our own studio.
Do you have anyone that will be there?
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of friends that are going, and then the NFL, the Pro Football Island guys have done an incredible job kind of growing the game, the coverage over there. So Michael McQuaid is the sort of face of that. He's actually doing the Irish national broadcast. He'll be in the studio doing that. So that's pretty cool.
Oh man, that is pretty awesome. Okay, well, you mentioned another thing I wanted to hit on here, which is the offensive line. Because like when you look at it from like a just strictly numbers point of view, it's interesting because 12 sacks allowed, it's the second most in the NFL. PFF, though, weirdly has them graded as the 10th best pass blocking team right now in the NFL. Run blocking is actually 6th. Is that a little bit of the Darrisaw effect? Like, what is the actual scope of what this offensive line is? Do you feel that it's like actually a solid group and maybe they just haven't performed up to what we were hoping in the first 3 weeks? Or are these numbers actually reflective that maybe there is a little bit more there than what we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is a sample size problem. Darrisaw's only just come back. Ryan Kelly, the center that they brought in, has been concussed as well. So they haven't had the 5 guys that they want as the starting 5 offensive linemen out there for basically at any point in the season. Some of the difference between PFF grade and sacks allowed is a quarterback thing, right? And McCarthy was holding onto the ball and age, and that's part of the problem. Carson Wentz tends to skew in that direction as well. So they might always give up more sacks than the sort of overall performance of the group would show. But yeah, I think this is an offensive line that can and probably will get better as the season goes on. They've been banged up for a large part, and also they haven't had the cohesion yet of having the 5 guys they want on the field playing together for the entire time. And we know, there is importance to the offensive line as a unit in the NFL, unlike I think pretty much any other unit where there's power to them just playing together for a period of time, right? Understanding that relationship is important. And they've, at various points so far this season, have had an injury to the left tackle, the left guard now, and the center, right? Those three guys have been in and out of the lineup. So, at some point, I would assume they're going to get all five of them on the field at the same time, and that should be a pretty good offensive line.
Well, and they're a little bit lucky to be blocking for a guy right now in Jordan Mason, who's coming out like a cannon, coming out of a cannon right now since he's been acquired by the team. First two games wasn't the starter. Aaron Jones hits the IR with the hamstring. He goes out there last week, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns in that first start of the season. Do you think with his acquisition from the 49ers, deep down the Vikings the whole time were kind of hoping that they would have an opportunity to put Jordan in a situation like this where he could shine and they go, oh, we might actually have like a real flashy kind of running back here. Not to, pour salt on Aaron Jones's wounds right now with the hamstring and all that other stuff. Obviously, they give him a contract, but like, do you think they really wanted to see what they had with Jordan Mason and hopefully this be the results they were getting?
I think they knew that there was a pretty good chance he was going to have to play, significant snaps during the season anyway. I mean, Aaron Jones has had injuries throughout his career. He's also a guy I think that they would like to spell and have as more of a running back by committee type of backfield as opposed to one bell cow guy. So I think they just liked him, thought he's a talented running back, and thought, look, there's a role in this backfield, regardless of what happens with Aaron Jones, where he could be a significant part of it, and be a good player and have a good 1-2 punch. And right now Mason's going to have to be both the 1 and the 2 punch. But I think when they're both healthy, they like the idea of being able to split that workload and use them both.
What do you think really was the reason why the 49ers felt so comfortable moving him? Because you look at their running back room, which McCaffrey, obviously an incredible player, but has health issues. Isaac Guerrero hurt, like Patrick Taylor. Like, it's just not a particularly strong room. Like, why do you think the 49ers were so comfortable with letting him walk to this team, which we're already seeing instant results from?
I have given up trying to understand what Kyle Shanahan believes is important in a backfield or how the dynamic should work or how he treats any of the running backs that he's ever acquired. It seems to be, I can't trace a pattern through it. Like the only thing we know for sure is that he thinks Christian McCaffrey is, like a supercharged running back and it's worth trading everything to go and get that guy and he changes everything. And that seems to be pretty accurate. In terms of everybody else he's worked through, like the guys he drafts, there's no rhyme, reason, or coherence to any of it. It's usually the guy that's drafted later that ends up being the better player. Going and getting a guy like Brian Robinson Jr. doesn't make a ton of sense based off the way they run that offense. Like, I don't quite understand how Shanahan views that backfield. It's never made a ton of sense.
Well, let's switch back here to the Vikings for a second, because we obviously have talked out about the tumultuous quarterback room, quarterback in, quarterback out. The wide receiver room, it's getting a little bit of a bump up this here week with Jordan Addison's return. He's being reinstated after a 3-game suspension for pulling a Sleeping Beauty on a freeway near the LAX. Jokes aside, actually a huge addition for the team to be coming back for a squad that still does not have a receiver, tight end, any pass catcher break 100 yards so far this season. He's certainly going to take a lot of pressure off of Justin Jefferson. But with him, do you immediately expect him to go out there and to be able to perform? Or is this going to be something where you see him having to build up snaps, maybe seeing more of Naylor, maybe seeing some other guys mixed in there? Or is he truly going to be like WR2 as soon as he walks on the field this week?
I think in terms of playing time, he should be, the number 2 wide receiver in the team pretty much right off the bat. There is sort of data and a history of guys that have sort of sat out the start of a season or, had hold-ins and not actually played the entire time, taken some time to ramp up in terms of production. And I think you're vulnerable sometimes to injuries in those first couple of weeks. But yeah, I think they'll roll him right out there and say, go back to work. This is the role you're there for. And then maybe it might take a little bit of time for us to really see that production kick in. But yeah, they could really use Jordan Addison as part of that offense.
And then the other guy, just mentioned him, Justin Jefferson, obviously one of the most elite talents in the NFL, still hasn't broken 85 yards yet this season, which is obviously a little bit shocking for probably the fantasy owners and those who are hardcore Vikings fans, but how much of that is really a result of the quarterback play, and how much of that is that they just aren't finding great ways to be able to put their quarterbacks in a position to be able to get him the ball?
I think it's a combination of the quarterback play and the fact that up until this point, the Vikings have only really had one weapon. It's Justin Jefferson, and you don't really need to worry about anybody else yet. TJ Hawkinson is a nice complementary piece, but with Addison out of the lineup, you're not allocating resources anywhere else. So you can really spend the entire week focusing on trying to take away Justin Jefferson. And as much as number one wide receivers are transformative and you can move things around and try and help them, if a team goes out there and says, look, we're bracket covering this guy, we're going to take him away high low, we're going to dedicate the bodies every single play, there's not much you can do about it, particularly if, you have a young quarterback. Wentz maybe is different, but with McCarthy, if you have a young quarterback and you're kind of trying to teach him, like, this is the look we're not going to throw, right? Like, if it looks like this, don't even think about it. I mean, every play to Jefferson is going to look like that more or less, because that's what a defense is trying to take away.
It's like what we saw with
There've also
Neighbors
been
this
some
week,
plays,
right? This past week with Neighbors, where like literally they just decided we're taking this guy away. You can do anything else you want.
and it's like, you can still target it, but it's going to be a bad look every single time. And particularly with a young quarterback, you're trying to get him away from those. You're trying to say, look, if it looks like this, move on, go somewhere else with the ball. So I think they're more susceptible with a young quarterback to those types of tactic on defense. There have also been times, late in the game where they have left them one-on-one, but, the Vikings are trying to run the ball or whatever. And I don't think that they necessarily trust JJ McCarthy yet to say, look, if he's one-on-one on the outside, even if this is a situation where we want to run the football, take the chance. That's a game ender. Kevin O'Connell might have been willing to let Kirk Cousins take that shot. He might have even been willing to let Sam Darnold take that shot. I don't think he's willing to let JJ McCarthy do it yet.
All right, let's flip things over to the defense. While the offense has been a little bit murky at times as to what it is, the defense, it's a different story. They've only allowed 49 points on defense specifically. That's the fifth fewest in the NFL. 814 yards allowed. That's the sixth fewest. They're tied for seventh in pressures. What are you seeing with this iteration of Brian Flores' defense that might be different than what we've seen in years past? Obviously, always a solid group, but this defense looks particularly impactful so far.
I don't think much has changed, except, they have steadily upgraded the personnel. They've added defensive linemen that can make more of an impact. I think you're seeing a whole collection now of defensive tackles that can bring some juice as pass rushers. They kind of traded away their one sort of true nose tackle, run stuffer type of body. And instead, they're just going like, we're going all in with one gap penetrating pass rushing types across this entire defense. And it's a well-drilled, disciplined group that is causing havoc in terms of pressure rushing the passer, and then also chaos on the back end with disguise and all those kinds of things. They look a little bit vulnerable and lightweight against the run, but I think that's a sacrifice they're perfectly happy to make in favor of the benefits against the pass.
And do you think that long term over the rest of the season and particularly into the playoffs, which obviously they're hoping they're making, that's probably going to truly prove to be beneficial for them, is just that true focus of being like, we're more athletic than you. We're not necessarily stout, but we're going to get pressure on your guy.
Yeah, it feels like it's a very different way of going about it, but it's the same sort of idea as the Buffalo Bills defense, where, that group is pretty lightweight against the run. They invite the run relative to other teams, and they do so knowing that they want to get a turnover. If they get a turnover, it doesn't matter if they gave up, 80 yards on the ground running the ball, because you got the turnover, you stole the extra possession, and that's winning football effectively. I feel like the Vikings are going to go the same sort of way, where they want to be so devastating against the pass that they're going to get turnovers, interceptions, fumbles, all those kinds of things, and then they can give up, some yardage on the ground. Every now and again, you're going to run into a team that doesn't turn the ball over, and you can't stop them in running the ball, and then you're kind of in trouble. And that's a little bit of what happened against Atlanta. There are other teams in the NFL that can do that as well, and maybe those will cause the Vikings some problems. But any other team, like, this is just such a chaotic and difficult defense to deal with.
It's funny, too, because particularly with their pass rush game, no one player has more than 2 sacks on the team right now. Do you think that they actually kind of see that as a perk where you know that there's, with the Cleveland Browns, you have Myles Garrett. That's the guy you're circling. Detroit Lions, you have Aiden Hutchinson. That's the guy you're circling. Like, you have this list of guys that you have to particularly watch out for. Do you think that's actually a little bit of an advantage for Minnesota, similar maybe to some of the Baltimore defenses we've seen over the last few years where like the sack numbers are there, but there's not one guy that just immediately stands out as like, this is the dude we have to watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty of this defense is they can get pressure from everywhere, and they don't necessarily need one guy that can get 15 sacks. They need 4 or 5 guys that can get double-digit sacks over the course of the season, and you can't tell where they're gonna come from. Plus, you get all the pressures chipped in from the blitzers, the linebackers, the secondary. Yeah, like that's the power of this defense is there's going to be pressure coming from everywhere. You've no idea where it's coming from or when. And then just the more you can upgrade the individual one-on-one matchups, the better. And they've done that consistently over the last couple of years. You know, Grenard coming in, Andrew Van Ginkel coming in. Dallas Turner had a breakout game the other week, and that would be a huge development for them if he took a step forward and really made an impact this year as well. And then those defensive tackles we talked about, whether it's the guys they brought in, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, or the young guys, Redmond, Levi Drake Rodriguez even, if they can just get, like the Eagles roll 7, 8 deep on the defensive line, and that's what makes them terrifying. If the Vikings can get into that kind of world, plus all the blitzing they do, then yeah, that's a very difficult defense to pick up when it comes to pressure.
I'm going to jump over to the secondary here. We had Josh Metellus on during the offseason, and he spoke a lot about the secondary. We've also had Durante Jones, who's their secondary coach, on this show here. It's a very interesting group. When Metellus was on here, the player he wanted to spotlight was Isaiah Rodgers. And Ari and I kind of talked about it, and we're like, it's an interesting pick. Not the guy that we necessarily thought was going to jump off the page as the guy that we should be spotlighting. No offense to him, but just not somebody that we really thought was like, this is the circling the guy. Fast forward this past week, 2 forced fumbles, interception, 2 touchdowns, that perfect PFF grade that we saw, the 99.9 total defense PFF grade. It's not like a secondary full with these big name players that we're necessarily used to seeing, but they're quite dynamic. Is it fair to say that they are maybe the most quote unquote dynamic secondary that we see in the NFL right now?
I think the thing that characterizes them is they're extremely well drilled. Like it's because even independent of Isaiah Rodgers, whatever you think about how good or bad he is, one of the other corners is Jeffrey Okudah, who's been a complete and total bust up until this point in his career. Number 3 overall draft pick and is already on his 3rd, 4th team, whatever he's on. And, those guys do not get moved on unless they are really, really struggling. And Okudah has not been a problem so far. In fact, if anything, he's been making plays. And part of that is because this defense is so good at disguising and moving around pre and post snap. And, you're showing one thing and you're actually running something completely different. And that only works if everyone understands what their role is and where to be and how to get there. And at that point, you're not relying on them just going out there and covering a guy one-on-one for a lot of the time. You're relying on them showing one thing and then shooting to a completely different spot and playing a very different assignment, and just the quarterback panics, puts the ball in the wrong place, and you can make plays. So I think what you're seeing is, whether or not a guy like Jeffrey Okudah could hold up one-on-one in man coverage all game long, he understands how to run this defense. He's bought into the program. He's learned the defense and isn't making mistakes. And as long as all those guys stay on the same page, so much of their production is going to be based off that in tandem with the pass rush we just talked about. Like, they're kind of minimizing the amount they have to rely on the guys being good, essentially. And that's a powerful thing, because secondaries in the league, generally, they're like a weak link enterprise. If you have a bad player in a secondary, even if there's only 1 out of 5, offenses are very good at putting a target on that guy, a bullseye, and going after him. But you can't do that if you're busy panicking about where's the pressure coming from. Are they actually running cover 2, or is this cover 0, or like what am I looking at? And suddenly you just got to fire the ball out and hope you got it right. That's what the defense's power is they're taking away so much of the emphasis on the actual players on the back end, and they're just confusing teams.
Do you? That's the perfect word I was about to ask. Is it fair to say this is maybe the most confusing defense in the NFL for an opposing quarterback?
100%. I mean, I think it has been since Flores has been deploying it. You go back, it was the first defense, I think, that caused serious problems for the Shanahan scheme, right? That coaching tree where they would run it into this defense. The first time he played it, I think Brock Purdy had like 3 interceptions or something. And they were all interceptions of like, because the power of that Shanahan scheme is he understands defensive rules and he's going to put a receiver where somebody isn't. Well, the Vikings just kept popping up with a player where they were like, he's not supposed to be there. Like all of a sudden, Josh Metellus shows up right where this crossing route is supposed to be, and Brock Purdy just throws it right to him. And it's not a case of like, how did Brock Purdy not see that guy? Is that Brock Purdy thought the rules were going to be different and that guy was going to be somewhere else. But Flores just changes that. And so it's the first defense that caused problems for that scheme. And it does it for everybody else. I mean, you go and watch any Vikings game at the moment, the number of looks they are showing an opposing offense in any given play, it's a nightmare to try and diagnose.
Is it fair to say they're almost playing offense with their defense against the opposing offense? Like, while so much of defense is being able to be prepared for what you're seeing lined up on the other side of the ball, it almost feels like to me that Flores is like, no. I'm the one in control here. I have a way that I want to attack your offense.
Yeah, I think generally that's a theme in the NFL at the moment is you're seeing defenses take the initiative again, and they're saying, usually defense is kind of reactive, right? You have to line up based off what the offense is showing you, what personnel group they're in, what their alignment is, 3-by-1, 2-by-2, whatever. And you've kind of got what you're doing is largely dictated by what the offense shows you. Instead, people like Flores and other defenses throughout the league are saying, no, I mean, we're going to broadly match up. We're not going to leave a guy uncovered or anything, but we're going to take the initiative. We're going to move guys around. We're going to show you one thing. We are going to make you adjust your protection, your alignment, your passing play, maybe even your entire play based off what we're showing you and make you go on the defensive.
All right, it's time for the big question here, Sam. Confidence level in this team entering week 4, is it higher or lower than where you were with this team before the season started?
I think it's basically the same. It's a weird way of getting there, and they've changed quarterback, but they've kind of ended up where we thought they would be, which is ton of confidence in the defense. I think the offense is okay, but nothing special. And then they've been banged up, and once they get guys healthier again, I think they have a higher ceiling then. But you could equally see them. I mean, look what Cleveland's defensive line just did to the Packers. Like, you could see them doing the same thing to Minnesota, and this being like a game where they don't get anything going.
Sam, thank you so much for stopping by today. With no Ari here, we had to get some really good analysis in. I know that you follow these Minnesota Vikings closely. You're on Check the Mic Monday, Wednesdays, and today here on Thursdays as well. So if you haven't already listened to Check the Mic, go over right now. The best game previews you're going to find anywhere else. You and Steve talking through everything. If you guys were given the option, how long would that show be on Thursdays? Previewing.
I think we've kind of hit our limit now, our natural limit. I don't think we would go that much longer. Previously when we were in somebody else's studio, we basically had to get out at a given time. Now we can go as long as we want.
You guys pop on all the time, so make sure you guys are on YouTube. Instant reactions. You guys have memberships turned on now. There's a lot of great fans that are following you guys. Steady growth on that channel here on the 33rd Team Network. If you guys haven't already subscribed here to us here on NFL Spotlight, not sure why you made it about 30 minutes into this episode before realizing you haven't subscribed. So go ahead and do that. Go over on X. Hit Sam up at Sam Monson NFL. Tweet whatever you're feeling at him. He loves to get all of your thoughts and just be able to delve into that every single day and just rein in the fun that is people tweeting things at him. You can also tweet at me at Ben Allen Sports. Last night I had somebody say I'd be the great presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. I had to remind them I am a sports broadcaster and not the representative from California. It's always fun when you're on social media, Sam. I don't think there is anything else you can say other than 2 thumbs up fun when it comes to X.
Yeah, I still don't think you should close the door on that presidential nomination yet without finding out what the game plan is.
It is true, although I'm not old enough to run yet, so that might be a little bit of a problem. And unfortunately, you also will not be running anytime soon for the president unless we really change rules up. And then it's just, hey, well, first we got to get you citizenship first, though. That's the first thing.
It's coming. The interview is anyway. Whether or not I get it is different, but the interview's on its way.
Hope you've been studying up here, and hopefully you guys have been studying up here on NFL Spotlight. Our fearless leader, Ari Meirov, is going to be back on Monday, where we're going to talk about all the action from week 4, the biggest storylines. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and we will be back on Monday. See you guys then.